The luck of the Irish was not on the Leafs side as they suffered a frustrating loss to the Hurricanes. I'll go over that and more here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your daily fix for all things Leafs. I'm your host, David Morassutti from Sportsnet. As always, the Locked On Leafs podcast is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so make sure you subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from, and make sure you're all going to subscribe on YouTube. Locked On Leafs, we're trying to get to 5,000. Once we get to 5,000, we will be giving away a Leafs jersey. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/locked on to get started. Hopefully, there wasn't anyone here who lost money on FanDuel and betting on the Leafs on Saturday. Because I don't know about you, that would have been a frustrating way to lose a bet. Seeing the Leafs team lose 5-4, blowing a lead late and losing in a shootout. Nothing worse than watching your team lose in a shootout. It's so demoralizing. And unfortunately, that's what happened to the Leafs against the Carolina Hurricanes. Look, a lot of good things you could take from this game, and I'll get to more of that in the good, bad, and the ugly. But let's kind of go through everything that happened in this game. Leafs get up to a 3-0 lead, take advantage of some very uncharacteristic play from the Hurricanes, brutal giveaways, giving up breakaways. It looked like the Leafs had kind of busted through the Carolina Hurricanes system a little bit here. They're, very stingy defensive system, and they allow the doors to open a little bit here. They allow a couple goals in the second period. Near the end, third period, the Leafs build up a 2-goal lead again, only to then leave the door open for the Hurricanes to make a comeback late in the period, send the game to overtime. A penalty against the Hurricanes in overtime, giving the Leafs a chance with a 4-on-3 late in the game, late in overtime to put the game away, get those full 2 points. Leafs could not cash. It goes to a shootout, and unfortunately, nobody on the Leafs could score a goal on Kochetkov, leaving the Hurricanes getting the win off of a Jake Gensel shootout winner. Jake Gensel also scored his first goal as a Hurricane the following day, on St. Patrick's Day. By the way, happy St. Patrick's Day. As I'm recording this, it is still St. Patrick's Day. So happy St. Patrick's Day to everyone who celebrates, which is a lot of people, as I know. Let's kind of go over the St. Pat's theme, because that was a big part of the night. Obviously, it's the St. Patrick's game, and as you see, I do delve into a little bit of the St. Pat's gear. I got my St. Pat's jersey. Obviously, that's the old one. The old Tavares one up there is got the old numbers that Mike does not like. I actually really liked the St. Pat's look. See, the thing is, when they show pictures of the jerseys on players, because it's all done with marketing and make things look a certain way, I thought they looked great on the ice. I saw some people posting pictures getting it from at the game. I thought it looked even nicer. So Leafs did well here. You might see me pick up one. Hopefully there's a sale, because usually that's when I go and grab jerseys I kind of like. And I can throw it into the rotation for St. Patty's Day gear for next year. But bravo to the Leafs for doing a good job with those jerseys. It's very tough to find teams doing a good job with jerseys, especially nowadays. So big kudos to the Leafs for nailing the St. Pat's jerseys. When you look at this game here, and look, going into the morning skate, there was obviously a little bit of a scare with Samsonov having to leave practice in pain. Many thought he hurt it. Obviously, he hurt it making the save. Not many people know exactly what happened. It turns out Ilya Samsonov saved the puck in an area that a goaltender generally shouldn't really try to save the puck. Didn't really feel so good. And Sheldon Keefe made sure right away to say that, don't worry, Samsonov is going to start. And I think what threw people off is there were reporters saying that Brad Treliving was talking to Joseph Woll as he was coming off the ice. That might have just been a, hey, he's good. Just be ready just in case, but Samsonov's good, right? I think maybe sometimes we read a little too much into things like that without getting the full story. So fortunately, any fear that the Leafs had about Samsonov not being able to play were squashed. And I thought Samsonov was pretty good in this game. Obviously, he faced a lot of rubber, 40 shots on goal, making 36 saves. It was a goaltending duel with Kochetkov and with Samsonov. And I thought Samsonov made some big saves in this game again. Like, this is the type of game where, we were talking about the whole goaltending battle between Samsonov and Woll. That's really starting to get going here because over the next few weeks, what do we really have to talk about? Goaltending is usually something a lot of people bring up, especially when teams feel like they haven't defined a starter yet. I think right now the Leafs are leaning Samsonov just based on what we're seeing right now. And this is a game right here where, yeah, would you like to have seen Samsonov make a few more saves? Of course. But I thought, considering the chances he faced in this game, I thought he did a pretty good job. So obviously, other things kind of didn't go the Leafs' way. I felt like, and again, I'm going to get into a little more detail about it in the good, bad, and the ugly. But when you look at this game, we know that they're still without Mitch Marner. Calle Jarnkrok, we find out, is out. He's sidelined week to week with what they say is a hand injury. So we don't know exactly how long this is going to be. We don't know exactly what's going on with the injury. But basically, again, the Leafs lines get thrown into a little bit of blender here. Pontus Holmberg takes Jarnkrok's spot on the top line. You see him kind of switch around with Bobby McMann, especially in the third period, which I didn't hate. Bobby McMann was playing pretty well, deserving of more opportunity. Unfortunately, that top line wasn't very effective. The Bertuzzi, Matthews, I guess you call it the Holmberg because Holmberg was on for most of it. All right, and you had Domi with McMahon, Nylander, Nyes with Tavares and Robertson. Of course, the fourth line of Dewar, Kampf, and Gregor. Ryan Reeves getting the night off. Like, it kind of throws everything in a loop again. And look, I can understand, in a way you kind of have duos you work with, but they're Sheldon Hughes had to tinker. Injuries have kind of thrown things into flux, and it gives a chance to show different things going on in the game. I do get that, but at some point, I think we're gonna have to see how they can tinker these lines a little bit more to make things better. So there were a lot of notable things I think in this game that going forward they're gonna have to still work with. Obviously, the big one here is Nick Robertson back in the lineup. He scores a goal. Sheldon Keefe kind of felt like that was coming, saying that he's been off for a while. Anytime he's come back into the lineup after being demoted, he always seems to have his best game, and that's good. Like, I'm glad that Nick Robinson is able to kind of come back in and show that he can be a producer right away. That's never been the problem. The problem is when you get to about 5, 6, 7 games where he's in the lineup and he kind of loses his, he's not as effective, right? And so for Robertson, that's going to have to be the big challenge here. How do you kind of keep it going? How do you keep the momentum going so you make yourself worthy of being in the lineup more? Now, we don't know how long Jarnkrok's going to be out for. So right now, Robertson has a spot with Jarnkrok out, right? Along as Marner's out, Robertson remains in, right? So this is an opportunity for him. This right here is the biggest opportunity Nick Robertson will have, between now and the end of the season to show that he can be in this playoff lineup, because we said, when he was sent down to the Marlies, doesn't look like there's a spot for him right now. And unfortunately, there's guys who have moved past him in the lineup, but guys can fall off a little bit here between now and the end of the season. And that's where Robertson has to come in and make it a hard decision on Sheldon Keefe. So again, thought he did pretty well in this game. Scoring goal really will help boost things a little bit for yourself. So we'll see if they can continue that. All right. Let's get a little more in focus about things that the Leafs did well, what they didn't do great about, and what was flat out ugly about this game. We'll do the good and bad and the ugly here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. The offer is good through April 30. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal information. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Gold Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC member SIPC is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back here to the Locked On Leafs podcast. David Morassutti here, and I guess I forgot to mention, it is me solo for this week. Mike is away, as he mentioned on the last show. We might try to get Mike here on the show. We're working through whether we can get him a stable enough internet connection while he is away for this week. If not, I do have some people lined up to fill in for Mike to help keep the show afloat. Right, this is it's a busy week for the Leafs, right? You know, their week is pretty much back to back, day off, back to back. And it's not an easy week. They got the Flyers, Capitals, Oilers, Hurricanes. NHL, I don't know what they're doing with their schedule. Mike and I kind of touched upon this. 4 days off, play a few games. Now they got to play some back-to-backs. Like that makes it really tough. But in a way, it really will test the Leafs, right? You kind of get yourself into the grind a little bit of the playoffs. And the Leafs really do not have a favorable schedule when you consider the teams they play between now and the end of the season. A lot of Atlantic Division matchups, including some against the Canadiens. You also have some matchups against the Panthers coming up, the Sabres, who have been really hot. And you got a couple against the Lightning down the stretch, the Devils, Red Wings. So a lot of different opponents going to be thrown at the Leafs between now and the end of the season. With that being said, let's kind of go over this game, though. We still have to finish things off here with the good, bad, and the ugly. So let's start with the good from this game. What I think was good. Well, I thought the fact that, going to this game, everyone was talking about how the Leafs were going to have to really find a way to break through the Hurricane structure. The Hurricanes like to suppress shots. They don't give up a lot of chances. Credit the Leafs because they really did find a way to get some chances on that. They found a way to get to those tough areas. And that's what I had my concerns with in a game like this where their opponent really does bunker down. The Leafs have really struggled. Now, you look back against the Bruins, the way they played against them last week. This was a team that struggled to get chances when the other team's defensive players were really hunkering it down. 5-on-5, the Hurricanes still had an advantage when it came to chances on that. They had that advantage. I get that. And they still had the advantage on shots and all those things. All I'm saying is for a team that really limits high danger chances, the Leafs did a pretty good job of getting those chances on that. So I'll give them a lot of credit for that. Another good thing was seeing Nick Robertson get on the board. I think that's kind of important for his confidence there, right? You need to see him get more of that between now and the end of the season, right? See if he can really be a factor for this team. Let's go. Unfortunately, the good was getting the lead. The bad was giving up the lead. And I'll kind of tie in the bad and the ugly kind of together here because I think they're kind of simultaneous here. Because the bad was that they gave up this lead. And the worst part about giving up this lead was you're up 3-1 going into the end of the second period. You have a 3-1 lead. You take a penalty. Then you allow them to score with seconds left in the period. They have done this countless times this year, the Leafs. They have allowed just a little sliver of hope to the other team that they can come back And that goal, that second goal they allowed on the power play late in that second period, I think really kind of flipped momentum a little bit here, because in that third period, boy, were the Hurricanes all over the Leafs, right? You look at the chances in that third period alone. Now, it was 6-2 Hurricanes high danger chances against the Leafs in that third period. It goes to show, I thought the Leafs learned something in that win against the Flyers, which is this team cannot sit on a lead in a period when they're up even a couple goals in the third period. They just showed it again that their best defense is one where they continue to maintain possession and keep the puck on the other end. Now, you're not always going to have what happened against Philly happen against like a team like Carolina. They're going to eventually find a way to hunker down and really make you work. Okay. And in that third period, I felt like the Leafs really left their foot off the gas. They got chances, they got shots on goal, but the Hurricanes really pressed, and the Leafs failed to counter that. You know, what they did so well in the first and second period, another thing I forgot to mention good was the Hurricanes were trying to be aggressive at times, and the Leafs took advantage. And in that third period, the Hurricanes were aggressive. They were trying to tie in the game. They pulled the goalie late, down by 2. You score a goal there, they're down by 3. We ain't talking about this game going to an overtime and shootout. What do the Leafs do? Fail to clear the zone, give the Hurricanes extra possession. The guys on the ice get out for extended shifts. They're tired. They blow coverage. Ends up in the back of the net. It's a constant issue with this Leafs team. And until they figure out a way to solve that, a game like this is going to happen more often than not. This is playoff hockey. That game against the Hurricanes is pretty much playoff hockey, right? And I think the disappointing part was that top line with Matthews, Bertuzzi, and Holmberg didn't really have a great night. I know they really want to get Bertuzzi going. I do like the fact that they're trying to get that Matthews-Bertuzzi connection going. Unfortunately, Pontus Holmberg is not able to handle a top line role. In my opinion, he's not able to. There's a reason why he's been in and out of the lineup. He can do some things offensively. Defensively, though, one of the goals, he's not able to cover a guy in front of the net. It's in the back of your net. If you're going to be a first liner and you're stuck in your zone, because the Leafs do have those, they like to put Matthews out sometimes in the defensive zone. You got to be able to handle that defensive responsibility. And Holmberg didn't there. There's a reason why Bobby McMahon was brought up there. He's actually got really good defensive numbers. I think people really don't see, right? Because we always talk about the goals that Bobby McMahon scores. But the reason why he does is because he's very responsible on both ends of the ice. So maybe the option is you give Bobby McMahon some time there. Again, we don't know how long Mitch Marner is out for, and we don't know how long really there's no rush to bring Mitch Marner back. I do want to stress that. So maybe this is a time where you give other people a chance. Maybe it's McMahon. Maybe it's even a Nick Robertson. Although him defensively, I don't know how much better you're going to get, but maybe you got to try something else there. I don't think Holmberg is the answer on that top line when Marner is out. Because again, injuries can happen, and you're going to see which guys work in certain situations. For me, they've tried Pontus Holmberg on the top line before. This isn't new, and I understand Austin Matthews talks about the skill that he has and all the things he does very well. But being able to play defensively in your own zone, that's important too. I think Holmberg kind of failed on that. But I'm not going to make Pontus Holmberg the scapegoat here. I'm going to make that very clear. Because, again, this team's special teams is going to be their undoing if they don't pull it together. Okay? Look, and Sheldon Keefe kind of made it seem like he wasn't too worried about the special teams. I'm sorry, but you had great chances to put this game away. Because, as you know, there were some chintzy calls against the Leafs. I always hear people complain about the calls against the Leafs. It means nothing, though, if the call is coming your way, you're not able to take advantage. And to me, that's a bigger problem that I have with the Leafs right now than the penalties being called against them. Yes, the penalty kill has been brutal. made that known. They need to fix that. But the bigger issue here is you can offset that if your power play is doing good. And unfortunately, the power play hasn't been good, right? Like it's a twofold issue right now. Leafs had 4 power play opportunities, including that one in overtime. That game should not have gone to a shootout. You have a 4-on-3. A lot of teams find a way to win that game in overtime when you have a 4-on-3. And they didn't do it. Look, Kochetkov made some big saves. I'll give him that. But you have a 4-on-3. I wanted to see a little more urgency. Get more pucks on net. Get that penalty kill moving around. They didn't do enough of that. I'm sorry, they went over 4 on the power play in this game. They allowed 2 power play goals in this game. Both power play goals they allowed were crucial. Of course, they also pulled the goalie late too, so they were shorthanded for that part of the period. That cannot. They can't continue like this. I'm sorry. Like some people might think it's overblown. I don't think so, because in a tight game, there's 1-goal game. Special teams is where you win a lot of those and lose a lot of those. Sheldon Keefe has to figure it out. So does the rest of this team. I get that. But a lot of it's also systemic, I think. When I see 2 defensemen in front of the net, well, there's a guy behind them, and he is allowed to go for the rebound because the other 2 guys are too slow to get to him. Something needs to change. I've seen it, and I get tired of seeing the same issues again and again. You can bring in a Joel Edmondson to help fix that. You can bring in a Lilybushkin to help fix that. But if they're being told to play a certain way on the penalty kill because that's the system you have, and other teams exploit it, change the system a little bit here. That to me is what's frustrating. So, yeah, do the players need to be better in those situations? Absolutely. But do the coaching staff also need to recognize certain things aren't working? Yeah, I think so. So I think the Leafs really need to find a way to hunker down here because it's inexcusable to blow a 2-goal lead that late in the game against a team like that. You could have really sent a message. Unfortunately, guess what? The message you sent was the pressure got to us. We couldn't finish it off. The other team found a way to get those big goals that also Leafs couldn't get. It's all in these. It's just so frustrating because you're going to have so many games so many times when you look back, why are the Leafs in the situation they were in? It's because of games like that where you could have won the game and you lost the game. And instead of that being 2 points in the bank, I understand you're not even getting close to probably catching the Bruins or the Panthers. Again, never say never. You look at how some teams are playing right now. A lot of close standings getting close, right? I don't think the Atlantic Division, like the Leafs can keep themselves in that 3rd spot very easily, right? Their fate's been determined in a lot of ways. I get that. But you've got to fix these things because it ain't getting any easier when you have to go up against Panthers or Bruins in the first round. Sheldon Keefe better figure it out. He better not be complacent. If you go and read Luke Fox's column, that the Leafs should not be complacent. They shouldn't feel like things are going right. They need to realize things are not working. They need to change. Okay. That's all I need to say about that. The Leafs cannot look at that game, feel good about how that game went. To me, they shouldn't. So that's all I have to say really about that and how that game went. We're going to take a break. We're going to go over brings a little bit of uplifting because there are some good things happening with the Leafs nowadays, and not just with the actual team right now, but also in the farm system and also with their prospects. So we're going to highlight one specifically, Easton Cowan, doing something that no other player in London Knights history has done. We're going to go through that and a little more touching upon the week ahead with the Leafs here on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tourney, which is starting very soon. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a 1 seed, it's time to go dancing on America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets. If your $5 bet wins, that's $200 to use on point spread, money line. You can even pick who's going to win it all. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. FanDuel, official partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Welcome back to Locked On These Podcasts. David Morassutti here. As you can see, I'm going to be solo. Hopefully to have Mike back maybe sometime this week if we can figure out his internet connection while he's away. If not, I will have actually some guests who have also offered to go on the show and give me a little bit of a hand as we navigate this week. And so we're going to put that game in the rearview mirror. We know what the Leafs need to work on, and hopefully the Leafs realize what they need to work on. One player that doesn't need to work on his game apparently right now is Easton Cowan with the London Knights. What a story he's been this season. You know, when the Leafs picked him, we talked about it. You know, a lot of people felt that was a bit of a reach by the Leafs. And yes, I'm going to preface this by saying sometimes we tout prospects a little bit too much, especially when they're out. Guess what? This is the Leafs podcast. We are going to pump the tires of our prospects because that's what we do here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. And Easton Cowan has done something that no other London Knights player has done in their history, which I think this is quite incredible achievement. He has now had a point in 34 straight games. We've been talking about this point streak a little bit throughout the podcast, but he has officially reached a new mark. It was previously held by Dave Gilmore, which was set back in the 93-94 season, the year I was born. So it's a 30-year record that Easton Cowan has now surpassed. He got 2 assists against the Windsor Spitfires. He now has 90 points in 52 games this year. Like when we talk about Easton Cowan's game, you know, this is a guy who had 53 points in 68 games, and I get it. Junior players have the tendency where they're going to see that bump, especially guys as they get older, more mature. They learn a few things, right? They get put into different situations. They're put in a position where they're going to produce more. And he's done that, right? But here's the thing about Easton Cowan. Well, those numbers in the regular season I just mentioned from last year, 53 points in 68 games, where his breakout started to happen was in the playoffs. When the London Knights went on their playoff run, he had 21 points in 20 games. And that right there is where I think a lot of scouts started, especially in the Leafs, really started to pay attention to Easton Cowan more. And this is why I'm excited for a prospect like this, because he elevates his game. He elevated his game in that moment, in the brightest, toughest pressure moment for his team. There's a reason why the Leafs kept him around for an extended training camp too. So if you're excited about Easton Cowan, you have a reason to be excited about Easton Cowan. I think he's done quite a great job, right? And so the Lights only have a few games left in the season. So only a couple of games left. You want to go see him. I think they play the Spitfires again this week. So we'll hopefully get to see a little more screen time when the OHL playoffs come around as well. And so that's I think a really important story there when you're looking at the Leafs prospects and how well they're doing. The Marlies have done actually, again, that's a team that's really kind of found its stride a little bit here too, coming off back-to-back wins this weekend. And I again, it's easy to kind of get excited about how well teams are and young players are doing. But again, the Marlies, I think they've been doing quite well. They've had a lot of players come up for the Leafs this year, notably Bobby McMahon. Nick Robinson spent time this year. You know, they've had to bring up a defenseman or two. Unfortunately, Dennis Hildeby has spent some time but hasn't really played that much. So, you know, you should be very happy about what we've seen from, you know, this organization and what they've done here. Of course, results are one thing, development is another. So we'll see how all those things happen with the Leafs. But the Marlies come off with a 7-1 victory over the Laval Rocket on St. Patrick's Day. And then they also won 7-3 in their prior game. They did a back-to-back Scotiabank game where the Marlies played in the afternoon and the Leafs played in the evening. So the Marlies have been playing quite well. I'm just going to take a quick look here at the standings and where the Marlies currently, and look, the AHL is very, very tough. You know, the Marlies are in a very tough division right now. They have a 27-20-9 record this year. Again, a lot of ups and downs. A lot of key guys have been injured or been moved around in the lineup here. Dennis Hildeby has kind of been, he's kind of cooled down a little bit since his, big start to the year. And that's kind of expected. He's still getting used to North American ice. They want to make sure they get a kind of a rotation here in net as well. He has a 907 right now. We know he was in the high 920s for a while in the season here. So he's kind of cooled off a little bit here. But again, kind of expected for a guy who's a rookie in the AHL. So we'll keep an eye on here. We'll hope to have some guys who cover the Leafs prospects come on the podcast. I might even reach out to a couple that I know that maybe can come this week and give us a little bit more of a Marlies and prospect report. So we'll do that on the podcast here. With that being said, I think this is probably a good time to wrap things up. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can go and follow the Locked On Leafs podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Make sure you follow the show on X at Locked On Leafs, and you can follow myself at D_Morassutti, and follow Mike at Mickey_Canuck. We'll be back with another episode tomorrow. We'll preview the Leafs' next game where they get a rematch against the Flyers in Philadelphia. John Tortorella back behind the bench. So we'll see how the Flyers respond to what happened the week before. And then we'll be teeing up the rest of the week here on the Locked On Leafs podcast. So make sure you subscribe and tell all your friends. And we'll catch you here next time on the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.